I'd now like to invite Beth to offer some words for this evening.
In the tradition of Jewish scholarship, it would be appropriate to talk about this week's very dramatic dream sequence in the weekly Torah portion. Was the ladder leading up or was the ladder leading down? But I'm seriously not qualified to speak as a Torah scholar. So on this day after Thanksgiving, I feel slightly better qualified to talk about gratitude. In 2020, we've all been required to find new ways to classify and define what gratitude means. What are we thankful for? How do we frame our lives through the lens of COVID, through the lens of civil unrest, through the lens of disparity in medical care? We are learning how to be close to our loved ones when we are unable to be near. We've learned new ways to work, cook, entertain ourselves. We've learned how to live and thrive in a world that we simply do not understand. And beyond the tasks of daily living, we have been forced by circumstances to reflect on our lives in ways that we may not have ever done before. Perspective is a prickly beast. How do we find happiness when new grandbabies are born and may not ever get to meet their great-Grammy? How do we smile at strangers when our faces are covered by surgical masks? How do you comfort yourself when you cannot hug your sisters? I have very few answers, but one thing that I work on each day is trying to adjust, readjust, and readjust again, the very perspective and thoughts and points of view. By saying that I'm grateful for food in my belly and a roof over my head seems to trivialize some of the other emotions that I feel. Please don't get me wrong, I'm thankful for every meal and every night that I sleep in my warm bed with my husband of 34 years and my dog of 9 years. I would never, ever take those things for granted. I am grateful, but those feelings of thankfulness can coexist with the discomfort, the sadness, the fury, the worry, and the apprehension of our current existence. By simply saying that you're grateful for your tasty Thanksgiving leftovers and a fuzzy blanket, you're denying your other emotions and concerns. By understanding and living with the concerns of life in the new normal, a term which I fully despise, we can coexist with the uncertainty of the future. A little more than 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with a little known degenerative eye disease. Eventually, this condition, which Andy refers to as googly eye syndrome, will lead to blindness. With no current treatment, I was sure that I had lost my essence. I was employed as a medical sonographer. I noticed every color, every insect, and I prided myself on being a perceptive and sensitive friend. How could I be me without my eyes? I will spare you the journey to insight on my sight, but over the last few years, I have reworked my perspective on myself and my life's journey. I found new ways to define myself. I am still a voracious reader, but now I listen to books. I am still involved with the career I love by teaching the next generation of sonographers. I still try to be a sensitive and caring friend. I stop and observe fascinating insects, but without as much detail. And the days of having my keys may be limited, but I have the ability to get around by other means. I perceive my independence as something that requires creativity, not as something of the past. Many years ago, when my son lost a close friend in a terrible car accident, the sadness was overwhelming. It seemed insurmountable. At the wise old age of 8 years old, he told me that he didn't know how to be grateful for his other friends when the friend that died could no longer be in this world. The perspective that we offered our grieving 8-year-old was to allow him to have a small piece of his heart, for sadness. He was allowed to visit that sad place when he needed, but he needed to spend most of his time in the happy part of his heart. That was a simplistic way to tell a small boy that his feelings of sadness were real and allowed. So many years later, when I received my diagnosis, I remembered that even as an adult, I'm allowed to and need to visit the part of my heart that holds loss. During the time of COVID, I think we can all visit that part of our heart that holds contempt of injustice or heartbreak for loss and the heaviness of being apart from our friends and family. And in the rest of our hearts, we can find the gratitude for the food in our bellies and the roof over our heads and the determination to make this world a better place. After all, the sad part and the happy part can make a little boy's heart whole, a woman losing her sight feel complete, and maybe help with framing a new perspective. So were the angels moving up the ladder or down the ladder? It's all a matter of perspective. Shabbat Shalom.